Bibliophobia. Bibliophobia is a fear or hatred of books. The simple act of reading, holding a book, or being in a library can cause anxiety, or even the fear of reading out loud. In this project, my aim was to explore my relationship with books. I'm dyslexic. Books have always represented a deep-rooted fear, feeling of alienation and inferior to others. But strangely, books have always appealed to me as objects. The age, the colour, the texture, even the glue that holds them together. The smell has also intrigued me. My intention is not to read them, but to photograph them in a way to show my want for them, seeing a beauty and encapsulating my fear in them. Perhaps partly through the lack of access, books have always fascinated me. In this work, I have tried to represent these mixed feelings. In some images, the books appear as labyrinths. In others, arid landscapes, or insurmountable walls or cliff faces. Yet in between appearance, an obstacle that's in my path. I hope a sense of tactile pleasure and engagement to the viewer with surface, form and texture.
This series of images explores the urban legend linking swinging with pampas grass. The deadpan images shot in the streets of Kent on the one hand depict little more than ornamental grass with striking feathery plumes. Seen in an alternative way, however, these exotic features of suburban gardens are a signifier of sexual play and promiscuity, and we may find ourselves looking carefully at the houses for any telltale sign. My aim is to show the signifier in its homely setting and maintain a tongue-in-cheek view of its associations with a fading sexual revolution, leaving the audience curious and wondering.
The theme of my work is abandonment, and in the way in which objects hold the power to express feelings of neglect and vulnerability. In developing the project, I began to focus on objects associated with play and childhood. Objects that would normally be expressive, joy and imagination, when separated from their users, take on an atmosphere of sadness and broken relationships. Taking this further, I experimented with placing objects in environments that heighten the sense of vulnerability. Urban, desolate spaces that perhaps put us in mind of narratives involving threatening encounters. With the objects of childhood placed in these locations, we are reminded of the exposure to harm faced by the most vulnerable in our society.
My work centres on representations of time in the landscape. Marks of Conflict is a long-term project exploring historic structures that have been built to defend the nation from invasion. In my most recent series of images, I combine structures of traditional defence, the pillboxes of World War II, with imagery associated with the more current notion of invasion. The southeast of England has become an entry point for migrants hoping to evade the barriers that control settlement in the UK. For some, this is seen as a battle against a new perceived enemy. For others, the rules of entry are harsh and lack humanity. The Borders, series of 4 images and a video installation, juxtapose traditional structures of defence with the battle against illegal immigration. The use of found images and videos projected on historic defences alludes to the clandestine, often nocturnal attempts to cross UK borders by a perceived enemy that takes on the mantle of invisibility. The work poses questions regarding our national stance against illegal immigration. My book, Marks of Conflict, is a more general exploration of a number of historic defence sites along the Thames and Medway estuaries, the Channel coastline and inland, and looks at the ways that these fortifications and military activities have marked the landscape, how they've been absorbed into the landscape, and how they may be viewed as silent memorials to their builders and occupiers.
All the World's a Stage. In this project, my aim was to make a series of still life images representing the plays of William Shakespeare through modern visual interpretation. My interest in Shakespeare stems from the way in which, even centuries after his death, he remains our most celebrated playwright and poet. I was intrigued by the idea that his plays continued to be performed worldwide, and his plots and characters continued to influence contemporary culture. Focusing on 5 particular plays, Hamlet, Macbeth, Romeo and Juliet and King Lear and A Midsummer Night's Dream, I have tried to represent each of the plays by assembling objects that symbolise them. For me, the themes love, loss, madness, innocence and fantasy hold a particular significance and relevance in the present day. It is these aspects of human life and our psychology and our social circumstances that Shakespeare could grasp so intensely in his plays that made me want to create these images by using objects as representations.
Aesthetically, these images took a lot of inspiration from social realism film, and despite some added challenges because of the coronavirus, I think the project came out really well. I'm very proud of it and happy with how it's turned out. It is quite a personal project, and I think because of that it's so nice to see it on a wall, albeit a virtual one. A Time to Be 13 is an ambiguous photo essay documenting the complicated time in a young woman's life that is often known as girlhood. Captured from a neutral standpoint, these images work best as a collection, navigating the pivotal time in a girl's adolescence. In a time of deep reflection, this series holds emotions often forgotten when it comes to the time of girlhood, such as isolation and confusion.
Passing Clouds by Jessica Erler. This series explores clouds and their meaning in the context of the imposed coronavirus lockdown. Clouds have been used both as a metaphor and a pathetic fallacy as they mirror my own states of mind during lockdown. Urban society is full of routine and predictability. This is contrasted by the unpredictability within clouds as they offer a refreshing escape from the patterns of everyday life, especially during lockdown, introducing an element of randomness and chance as they reflect moods. Whilst being confined to my home, I began to view clouds as a form of release. Taking more notice of their meteorological significance and their ever-changing patterns, this offered a heightened visual experience that heavily contrasted with the monotony of being restricted to your house, a never-changing environment. I have used a diptych format to try and represent contrasting moods and the quickly changing states of mind that we seem to suffer under lockdown.
For this project, I wanted to explore the theme of lost, forgotten and found in relation to children and childhood. Taking inspiration from Tracey Emin's series of sculptures, Baby Things, I used objects associated with early childhood to express the idea of separation. Many of the objects are from my own childhood, or that of a family member a generation before, and in making the work, I found that an additional sense of separation began to emerge. As well as the objects expressing the broken connections between parent and child, the work began to speak also of a past left behind, a world of childhood that none of us can return to.
This Precious Stone Set in the Silver Sea by Caroline Davis. For this video project, my aim was to try to represent the mayhem experienced in the UK during the time of Brexit. The passions felt and expressed on both sides are represented through rapid-fire collage and stop-frame animation. In the standoff between Leave and Remain, there were ideological differences, but behaviours also took on a tribal or animalistic character. The opposing opinions became stronger, leading up to Friday 31st of January 2020, which was the day the UK officially left the European Union. Within the video, the chaos is seen looking through a window. On the one hand, this is a reminder of our own perspective on the world and our own entrenched position. But on the other, within the frame of the window, we perhaps see everything from a new perspective. Reliving the strong emotions of Brexit, we perhaps see irrationality rather than reasoned political debate. In any event, the battle of Brexit was soon to seem quite trivial in comparison with what was to come. Looking through the window in the end becomes a reminder of the time that would follow, a time where the country is finally united in an era of lockdown.
We will get Brexit done on time by the 31st.
Opposition are
no,
and powerless in the Commons.
People voted a 47-year political experiment that the British frankly have
Dodgy day will answer it now.
It's time to clear
11 PM on January 31st.
the attack.
Even in that, the battle could last up to an hour.
We depart from the EU on the 31st of January, and at that point Brexit will be done. It will be over.
Hysteria throughout history has always been subjective and perceived as a female disease, stemming from the belief that female reproductive organs would manifest themselves into behaviours that conflict with acceptable female functionality. In this series of photographs, I aim to represent a breakdown in the stereotypical expectations of submissive womanly behaviour. Care of the home by the perfect housewife is thrown into disharmony by the female figure's transgressions from accepted norms. Elaine Showalter has argued that the terms hysteria and hysterical have been used to discredit a feminist demand for equality. Through Freud's writings, hysteria is posed as an explanation for female sexual desire, where the hysteria within is expressed through exaggerated emotion and contortion of the body. In my work, stripping the housewife figure to a state of nudity emphasises the curves and features of the female body that have associations with motherhood and sex. The contorted housewife figure develops into an image of rebellion and sexual frustration, which leads her to become a threat to the patriarchal order. In the series of images, I suggest that many of the historical prejudices are alive and well in contemporary domestic life. Disownership of the housewife duties and the desire for independence from traditional behaviours can, I believe, result in an oppressive reaction from those who refuse acceptance of this alternative normality. In the work, I hope to allude to the bewilderment that can result from a woman's refusal to conform. No longer the dutiful housewife, the female figure here is defined, self-expressive and liberated.